This week, I am back on Jupiter for a week of work. Continuing on from our current theme, I am addressing the corrosion issues in Jupiter², the aluminium performance cruising catamaran performance. Why? Because it's only 7 tons. Well, it should be. We're overloaded. Design maximum is 8.5 tons. We are easily 9, maybe more. Okay, back to the point. I have allowed corrosion to get away from me over the last 10 years. I was under the impression that it was just the paint peeling and nothing was actually going wrong with the aluminium. I'm wrong about that. So scared to remove the pretty paint, because when you remove paint, now you have an unpainted boat or a messy looking, unfinished, patchy looking boat. Finally, I've swallowed my pride and I am addressing those areas. On the decks, I will show you the corrosion that happens around an edge of paint. Wherever I've drilled a hole, like just for drain holes in the lockers in the cockpit, I have corrosion around the hole because I didn't seal it properly. There are ways that you can seal it which would have helped prevent the crevice corrosion that was happening. I didn't do that. I didn't know about it. Now I'm really learning to avoid it happening again. So the areas of corrosion that we're going to show you is on the deck, some bulkheads, around the hatches. This is got to be rubbed back. Any pitting should be filled and neutralized so it can't keep growing, and then the surface should be etched and then primed. And I've got some aluminium primer from Total Boat, which is what we're going to use to seal it up again. Now we're going to be covered in gray patchy areas. The top coat, I'm going to deal with that another time, probably in about 6 months when we come back in the fall, because summer is coming and it's getting hot. Pitting is another form of corrosion that's happening in the bilges, and it's from various things, including me allowing salt water to sit there, stainless steel fittings like hose clamps that were just touching in the area, and even the bilge pump itself. I was blown away to find that the bilge pump itself was causing corrosion. And I'll tell you how I came up with a solution to avoid that happening again. There is also a hint of chemical corrosion caused by the battery box, or the batteries themselves and the gases that they create. The batteries haven't been used for the last 2 years. So I did clean it up last time, but in that area, there was these little mounds of hydroxides everywhere caused by the gases from the battery, I think. But one area that I do know definitely was where I kept, in a compartment down there, where I kept a packet of sodium metabisulfite. That's the white powder that you mix up, preservative for the water maker. And in that cabinet, all the aluminium had a white powder on it, obviously because of the chemical reaction from the off-gassing of that sodium metabisulfite. So you got to house your chemicals well. I mean, this was inside a sealed plastic jar, but still the gases were getting out. And you can smell it because, you know, it makes your eyes water when you get too close to it. Obviously making my poor Allie's eyes water as well. Now, it was just furniture framing, and it's just like a surface powdering, so nothing too damaging, can be easily scrubbed off and store the chemicals in a better place. So that's what we're going to look at this week. Now let's get to work. Some of these lessons you sort of got to learn the hard way, because maybe I was told don't let this happen, and it's 10 years later that you realize, oh, there's actually some corrosion there. I wished I had listened. I didn't realize how important it was. One of the things, Brian, Karen, Delos, listen up closely. Plucky, Ben on Nahoa, come on, you guys got to listen to this, because this will save your hull. I'm sure I was told, I'm sure Tim Mumby told me, keep the bilges dry. Now, I didn't really think that was a big issue. So I'm standing amidships pretty much. this is my bilge, these are my stairs going up to the bridge deck, and this is the aft cabin. In here is my water maker, and it leaks a little bit, you know, it's a bit dribbly. You know, I made it myself. The fittings are just irrigation fittings from the hardware. It's a little bit dribbly. And I used to let the water just sit in the bilge. It was, you know, as long as it's fresh water. Fresh water should be good. It'll keep the aluminium healthy. But there's always a bit of salt in there, you know. I mean, there's salt water input to the water maker, of course. Now, please excuse the mess. We don't need you to be looking at this. Please don't look at this. Okay, we're looking in the bilges. That's all. So, water would sit down in here at the sump, you know, at the bottom of the bilge where the bilge pump is. Alright, come down here, I'll show you. Alright, so I'm sitting in the bilge uncomfortably. What we're going to see down here is some pitting, the worst of which was under the bilge pump. Now there's two reasons this could be. One is that the water is always sitting in that corner because it's the lowest part of the bilge. So there's always a half an inch of water just sitting there, and the salts sort of build up over time. Salty water, that's the electrolyte. All we need is a dissimilar metal, and we have a battery. Now the bilge pump is plastic, but not all of it. The shaft for the impeller is this tiny little stainless steel rod, and that was more noble than the aluminium. The aluminium decays, and here it is. So the bilge pump was mounted here, and I just glue. I don't fasten it any other way. I just glue it to the floor of the bilge, and then all these pitting showed up. The tiny little shaft of the bilge pump ate away my aluminium. So now I'm sitting it up here, out of the water, because honestly it does nothing unless it's 6 inches deep anyway. So there's always going to be a bit of water sitting in the bottom here. I'm getting my stainless steel out of there and putting it up there in the dry. There's one more culprit for causing galvanic corrosion with dissimilar metals, and that is hose clamps. Now, back in Asia, when this boat was built, so this was before the days of PEX, or at least before it was available in Philippines. So this is just simple chemical hose or garden hose. It looks like just a little more resistant. And hose clamps, stainless steel hose clamps. Now, as I say, this bilge would often have water sitting in the bottom of it, and I had this fitting, which was a T section, just sitting in the water. And I didn't think anything of it until I realized there was some pitting under where it was sitting. It was a battery. Aluminium was giving up its electrons. So I've elevated this fitting now so that it stays out of the water and remains dry. No more problems. But just one more thing you got to keep an eye on. Don't mix your metals in salt water, or any water for that matter. Hey crew, did you know that there's about 60% of you guys that are returning viewers but not subscribers? It would be so helpful if you could just push that subscribe button. It doesn't cost anything, no commitments, but it would help us out an awful lot. Appreciate it. Cheers. Now, another way to start corrosion in your bilge is by doing some electrical wiring. Alright. If you happen to just strip some wire, you are always going to get a few hairs of this copper wire that just go astray. This copper will, one strand of that will start eating your aluminium hull. So if you drop any of these, like here's one here, look at that. I don't know if you can see that there. You drop that in the bilge and you'll start corrosion. After I've been doing bilge wiring, etc., like the bilge pump wiring, I vacuum the entire lot. I get a torch down in there and I shine to make sure I've picked up any strands of copper wire. Now they say if you were to buy an aluminium boat from a divorce situation where the husband was forced to sell, make sure there's no pennies thrown into the bilge, because a hole the size of a penny will sink your boat. Alright, so let me show you some of the corrosion here. This is another problem with aluminium, is that it's painted and it chips. So look here, I'm going to wipe the dust here. I mean, around the door you can see paint chips. So you are always chasing those. In fact, we just use a little bottle of nail polish, which is acrylic paint, and we just touch it up like that. But you're always chasing chips. The big problem with aluminium is the corrosion. Now, anytime there's an edge of paint like this, like a paint chip, there's an edge, the oxygen gets under the paint and it starts to creep and crawl under the paint and start bubbling. And that's just the natural oxide of the aluminium, but it ruins your paint, and that's annoying. I'll show you here. Try and wipe some of this dust away. And we probably need a side light, which is why I have a torch, to see the bubbling. Can you see that bubbling there? And the reason is because there's a cutout for the instrument to go into the bulkhead. Screw holes to go into the bulkhead. And around any edge of paint, you get this bubbling. So this is in numerous places around Jupiter, around deck edges, like around the main sheet track here. Have a look at this. Now I've removed one section of track to expose some bubbling. So every screw hole, these corrosion has crept under the paint. It's not everywhere, but it's in a lot of places. Look at that. There. Now most of these deck fittings are welded, yeah? The track's not. Every bolt hole, that's where the corrosion comes. So it's where the bolt holes are, an edge of the paint, oxygen gets under there and starts bubbling. Let's have a look down with the horn cleats, which are actually welded on, but they're bubbling. Let me show you. All right. Now, paint edge, big bubbles. See that? It's even breaking open in places. So how are we going to fix that? I'm going to buy a cheap sandblaster, and I think it's glass bead grit that I need to use. We're just going to blow this paint away, and we'll have a new paint edge around. See, there's a coving here. There's a bog filler, which makes this nice curve. Probably have to touch up the paint, repaint around it. That will seal it and hopefully stop oxygen from getting under the paint edge. Oh, and there's more. Let's have a look at the hatch surrounds. That's a big problem. Because it's inside, it's going to be messy to clean up. Come on, I'll show you. That one. All right, the hatches, all of them, in pretty much every hatch on the boat has bubbling. Why? Because this dangly creates a ding, chips the paint, and then the cancer starts growing. Now that one's going to be messy because I don't want to sandblast inside. That's going to be, like every hatch has that problem because of these. Now, they're strong. They really, these dogs, they really tighten down nicely. These hatches have never leaked. Consequence, cause a paint chip, cancer. Wow. This is one of the biggest troubles with aluminium, is trying to keep paint on it and trying to keep the corrosion out. See that? That is the T-handle on this hatch. Goes here. This is corroded off. To buy a new one, I just got a quote $100 for this little thing. I wonder if that includes the new tariffs from China. Mind you, 10%'s not much. Still way too much money. Wow. All right, come on down. It's a little bit stinky and a little bit small, but this is the watertight compartment. Should be watertight. But this hatch here, there's a Bomar deck hatch. I've tried sealing it several times. I'm going to have to try again. But rainwater sits or in the lip, or so sits in the crack, and eventually it ends up in here. So this is always wet in here. So we got some sort of crystallization happening here. This is dry, but it's still, there's a pit. See that? It's a little crystal growth. And there is maybe a 0.5 millimeter pit. Maybe even more, maybe a 1 millimeter pit. And down in these corners you get some like balloons. Like there's some crusties here. There's water here. So I'd expect something there, but there's nothing. Here, got a little mound. Luckily, pretty much nothing under that one. But all these growths. See all this? There's always salt. Even though this is fresh water from the rain or the dew, there is always salt. See, there's a pit there. Now, don't be too alarmed. This looks pretty gunky in here, and it is, but it's not all strange chemical growth. It's actually, this is spray foam for insulation, and when they spray it, there's a lot of overspray, and it's all on the ground here as well. So all the yellowy stuff is actually just foam, so it looks worse than it is. But the trouble with that foam is it sort of hides the growth as well. So yeah, a bit of a clean up to do here. All right, inspired. I've got new found optimism. We're just going to tackle the corrosion issues as the priority. So I'm going to the biggest corrosion issue that I got. It's actually on the hull, which is rare. There's only 2 spots on the entire hulls, well above the waterline, that have corrosion. I guess the bog had poor adhesion, because the boat's been fed, so there's a lot of bog on it. I guess the bog had poor adhesion, and moisture's got under there. So I'll show you this one, just here. You can see the bubbling. I'll try to put you sideways. See the bubbling? Obviously the hatch, that's easy. All the hatches have some, but this is on the hull. So that's one area. Let's go look at the other side. Now that one, I know where that came from. It was repaired in South Africa. We had some scratches because in Mauritius we rubbed against the concrete dock, and in South Africa we had that repaired, had it rebogged and repaired, and obviously the bog didn't stick very well. Perhaps they weren't very clean before they put the bog on. So yeah, I got a bit of work ahead of me. Now, I hope I'm not sending you the wrong signals. It's not like I am pissed off with aluminium boats, not at all. I would love nothing better than an aluminium boat. It is so comforting to cross an ocean knowing the strength of the hull. and also the forgiveness, the elasticity. If you were to hit something in the water, aluminium is the most likely to take care of you. There's an elasticity of about 30% more than steel with aluminium that will absorb shock and not tear open like a tin can. So that's a very comforting thing to know on an ocean passage. In Jupiter's case, it's a very light boat. It's only 4mm thick hull plating. And Tim Mumby has designed it that way for performance. He likes to sail. This boat will sail well in light airs. 5 knots is all you need to make this thing move. Most other boats need at least 10 knots to move nicely. A lot of other aluminium cruising boats are in the 6 or 8mm range. It makes them up really heavy, unable to perform in light airs. Every substrate, wood, steel, fiberglass, alley, carbon fiber, they all have their kryptonite, they all have their weaknesses. This is aluminium. And I personally, for world cruising, I wouldn't have it any other way. Really happy with this boat for what we do with it. Well, this is the end of the day. I think we're day 3. I think we're this is night 4 anyway. It cools down quickly here. It's getting a bit cold already. Princess is out here walking Oakley. He didn't poo this morning, so that probably means that we're going to be up all night because he wants to go out. Any luck? Did he? No. Keep walking. Well, right now, all the boats are in the water. All the yachts that are going in are in for the winter. So, yeah, it's funny, you put the boat in the water for winter in Mexico. Everywhere else in the US takes their boats out of the water. But yeah, it's just way too hot. The off season is summer because it's just way too hot. Did you go down to the water's edge? Let's go. So we got, not many yachts in the yard right now. It's trawlers. And unfortunately, they are sandblasting. It's very dusty. You end up just sort of living constantly filthy dirty. Yeah, look at this. Oh, you're wrapping me up here, buddy. Intrepido. Is that a phone number? Ernestina. Vikingo. Moon Shadow. That's nice. Wow, look at that. That's lovely. Big boobies. Wow. Ugly face though. It looks like Dr. Spock. Wow, look at this old Hulk. Looks like the Jawa ship from Star Wars. Wow. What's happening? What's going on, buddy? Spacking out. Well, we got another 4 more nights before I got to head off back to Phoenix to go to work. We're coming into the end of winter here. It's warm in the daytime, it's pretty warm. So I think we've got 2 more stints, 2 more months to go before it's too hot to be here anymore. So I got to pull my finger out and get some work done. It's getting cool. Should we go in? All right, let's go. Oakman, you gonna do a dump? Come on, please.